Have you ever been invisible in your own home? Not physically, of course, but in the way that truly matters. In the hearts and minds of the people who should see you most clearly. That was my reality for 18 years. I was the wallpaper in a house where my sister was the masterpiece. The background music in a symphony where she was the solo. This is the story of how I discovered my own worth, even when the people who should have valued me most couldn't see it. And how sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting ahead. In the Mitchell household, there was a clear hierarchy. My sister Amber was the crown jewel, our parents' pride and joy, while I was just Jessica, the girl who existed in the margins. I can't pinpoint exactly when I realized this truth. Maybe it was during my 10th birthday when my parents cut my celebration short to make it to Amber's volleyball tournament. Or perhaps during my middle school graduation when they arrived late, having come straight from Amber's college recruitment meeting. By high school, I had accepted my place in the family ecosystem. Amber shined, and I supported from the shadows. Jess, could you grab the camera? Amber just scored the winning point. My father's voice would ring out at every game, his eyes never leaving my sister as she was hoisted onto her teammates' shoulders. I dutifully played my role as unofficial family photographer, documenting Amber's rise to athletic stardom while my own achievements collected dust in desk drawers. It wasn't that my parents were cruel. They loved me. I never doubted that. But their love for me was quieter, more obligatory, while their adoration for Amber was a thunderous public affair. When Amber brought home volleyball trophies, they went directly to the custom-built display case in our living room. When I brought home perfect report cards or coding competition certificates, they went on the refrigerator temporarily, only to be replaced by Amber's latest magazine feature or tournament schedule. "Your sister has a God-given talent," my mother would say, straightening Amber's team photo on the wall. "Not everyone is blessed that way, but you're so good with computers. Honey, that's practical." The word practical hung in the air like an apology. I stopped expecting my parents to attend my academic competitions during sophomore year. The one time they did come, when I won the state computer science challenge, they spent half the ceremony texting Amber, who was at a volleyball camp in Colorado. "Sorry, Jess," my father whispered, his phone lighting up his face in the darkened auditorium. Amber's coach might be offering her a fast track to Westridge University. This could be huge. Uncle David entered my life like a lighthouse beam, cutting through fog. My mother's brother, he taught computer science at Hartfield State University and saw something in me that my parents seemed blind to: potential. It happened organically. Him finding me hunched over coding problems at a family barbecue while everyone else cheered Amber's impromptu volleyball exhibition in the backyard. "Assembly language, huh?" he said, peering over my shoulder. "That's graduate-level stuff." I shrugged, used to downplaying my interests. "Just messing around." He studied me for a moment, then said something no one in my family had ever said before. "You have a mind built for this, Jessica. Not just good, exceptional." From that day forward, Uncle David's house on Cedar Lane became my sanctuary. 3 afternoons a week, I'd bike there after school, bypassing my empty home where no one would notice my absence until dinner. His study became my classroom, walls lined with computer science textbooks, 2 monitors humming with possibilities, the air smelling of coffee and opportunity. "The world runs on code now," he'd tell me, sliding a new programming challenge across his desk. "And the people who write that code, people like you, Jess, they're the ones shaping the future." For the first time, I felt seen, not as Amber's quiet sister, but as Jessica Mitchell, a person with her own unique gifts. Uncle David didn't just teach me programming languages. He taught me to value the way my mind worked, to see my methodical nature not as a lack of Amber's spontaneous brilliance, but as a different kind of intelligence altogether. "Your sister might get all the applause right now," he told me one evening as I solved a particularly complex algorithm. "But you're building something that will last long after the crowd stops cheering." Under Uncle David's guidance, my skills flourished in the privacy of his study. While my parents drove Amber to elite training camps and showcases across the country, I disappeared into the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Uncle David connected me with online courses from MIT and Stanford. He helped me build my first neural network when I was 16. Together, we entered my projects in anonymous competitions, where my age and background wouldn't factor into the judging. "You don't need their validation to be exceptional," he'd remind me whenever I felt the sting of my parents' indifference. "Just keep building, keep learning." And I did. During my junior year, while Amber was being courted by Division I volleyball programs, I was developing a predictive algorithm that caught the attention of several university research departments. I used a pseudonym in all my online work, partly out of shyness, partly because I enjoyed having something that was entirely mine, untouched by the family dynamics that defined everything else in my life. "You've created something remarkable here," Uncle David said, reviewing my code one spring afternoon. "This could open doors you haven't even considered yet." I allowed myself a small smile. If only they could see. I stopped myself, embarrassed by my neediness. Uncle David's expression softened. "One day they will, Jess. But do it for yourself first. Recognition from others is just a byproduct of excellence, never the goal." The irony of my senior year wasn't lost on me. While Amber struggled to maintain the minimum GPA required for her athletic scholarship considerations, I was quietly excelling in advanced placement courses and finalizing projects that were years beyond high school level. My algorithm for predicting transportation patterns had won a national competition, published under my pseudonym, JM Coder. The prize included a modest cash award and an invitation to a prestigious tech conference in Chicago. When the award letter arrived, addressed to my real name, I actually considered showing my parents. Maybe this would be the achievement that finally registered, that made them see me differently. "Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you," I began. At dinner that night, the envelope burning a hole in my pocket. But before I could continue, Amber burst through the front door, her face flushed with excitement. "They're offering me a spot at Westridge. Coach Reynolds called today." My parents erupted in celebration. My father pulled out a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. My mother made immediate plans for a family dinner at Riverside Grill, the expensive restaurant reserved for Amber's major milestones. "What was it you wanted to tell us, Jess?" my mother asked hours later as we were getting ready to leave for the restaurant. I touched the envelope in my pocket, then let my hand fall away. "Nothing important. Just a school project deadline. Changed." The award letter went into a folder in Uncle David's study, joining the growing collection of achievements that existed in a parallel universe, one where Jessica Mitchell mattered. The heart attack came without warning on a crisp autumn evening. Uncle David had been helping me finalize my college applications, focusing on programs with strong AI research opportunities. One moment he was explaining the difference between 2 university programs, and the next, he was clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. The following weeks passed in a blur of hospital corridors and hushed conversations. My parents, to their credit, were there for their brother and brother-in-law, handling medical decisions and paperwork. But in the chaos, I felt more invisible than ever. No one noticed that I'd lost not just a beloved uncle, but my champion, the only person who truly saw me. "The doctors are saying it's serious," my mother told me one evening, exhaustion etched on her face. "They're doing everything they can, but his heart was severely damaged." I spent every possible moment at the hospital, bringing my laptop to continue work on my projects, knowing Uncle David would want me to stay focused on the future. During one of his brief periods of consciousness, he beckoned me closer to his hospital bed. "My study," he whispered, his voice weak but urgent. "The blue book on quantum computing. Check inside." Before I could ask what he meant, the nurse arrived to administer medication, and he drifted back to sleep. That night, I went to his house, using the spare key he'd given me years ago. In his study, I found the book he'd mentioned, and inside, a sealed envelope with my name written in his precise handwriting. I couldn't bring myself to open it right away. It felt too final, too much like accepting that he might not recover. Instead, I placed it in my backpack and returned to the hospital, where I continued my vigil. 3 days later, Uncle David stabilized enough to be moved out of intensive care. The doctors cautiously suggested he might recover, though his academic career would likely need to change. The relief was overwhelming, but the weeks of stress had taken their toll on everyone. As Uncle David began his long recovery, our family settled into a new routine, one that still revolved primarily around Amber's athletic achievements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But now included hospital visits and medical discussions. It was during this time that I finally opened the envelope Uncle David had left for me. Inside was a letter and a flash drive. "Dear Jessica," the letter began. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Don't worry, I've always been one for contingency plans. What's on this drive is important. Documentation of all your work, letters of recommendation I've prepared, and contacts at several universities and tech companies who've expressed interest in your projects. I've been quietly sharing your work, with your permission, remember, with colleagues who might help advance your career. But there's something else, something I haven't told you yet. Keep going. The world needs minds like yours. All my confidence and love, Uncle David." The flash drive contained everything he'd mentioned, plus one unexpected file. An application he'd encouraged me to submit to the Hartfield State University Presidential Scholarship Competition, with a note indicating I'd advanced to the final round. Uncle David's recovery was slow but steady. During one of my visits, when he was strong enough for longer conversations, I brought my laptop to show him my latest project and to discuss the scholarship opportunity he'd secretly entered me into. "You should have told me," I said, trying to sound stern but unable to hide my gratitude. He smiled weakly. "Would you have applied if I had? You've always undersold yourself, Jess." He wasn't wrong. Years of being overshadowed had trained me to expect less, to aim lower than my abilities warranted. The Presidential Scholarship was Hartfield's most prestigious award, full tuition, room and board, plus research stipends. It was typically given to students with both academic excellence and demonstrated leadership potential. "The final interview is next week," I told him. "But I don't know, Uncle David. There will be candidates with perfect GPAs and national recognition. I'm just the most innovative young programmer I've encountered in 20 years of teaching," he interrupted, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Just the creator of algorithms that doctoral students would envy. Just someone who's achieved all this while being completely unsupported by the people who should have been your biggest fans." His words hung in the air between us, both acknowledging the reality of my family dynamic for the first time. "Promise me something, Jessica," he continued, reaching for my hand. "Promise you'll stop hiding your light. The scholarship, your future. Pursue them with everything you have. Not for me, not to prove anything to your parents, but because the world needs what you can offer." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I promise. And one more thing," he added, his eyes serious. "When the time comes, and it will, choose truth over bitterness. It's the harder path, but the only one that leads forward." I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I nodded anyway, making a commitment that would guide my actions in the difficult days ahead. The morning of my scholarship interview, I found my parents and Amber huddled around the kitchen table, a spreadsheet of figures between them. Their expressions, concerned, calculating, made me pause in the doorway. "What's going on?" I asked, adjusting the blazer I'd carefully selected for my interview. My father looked up, noticing my formal attire. "Where are you off to, so dressed up?" I have a college interview, I replied, surprised they hadn't even registered that this was a significant day for me. For a scholarship at Hartfield State. Oh, that's nice, honey, my mother said distractedly. Hartfield is a good safety school. I bit back a response about Hartfield's computer science program being ranked in the top 20 nationally. It wouldn't matter to them anyway. What's with all the numbers? I asked instead, nodding toward their spreadsheet. My parents exchanged glances, and Amber suddenly became very interested in her coffee mug. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Jess, we need to have a family discussion about finances, he began, using his insurance agent voice, the one reserved for delivering difficult news. Westridge University has offered Amber an athletic scholarship, but it only covers 70% of the tuition. With room and board, equipment, and travel expenses, we're looking at significant costs. My mother jumped in, her voice overly bright. But it's such an amazing opportunity. Westridge's volleyball program is top 5 nationally, and their alumni network is incredible for future career opportunities. Something cold settled in my stomach. And this affects me how exactly? Another exchange of glances. My father straightened his shoulders. We've had to make some difficult decisions. Your college fund? We need to reallocate those resources to support Amber's Westridge opportunity. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My college fund? The one you've been building since I was born? The one Grandma contributed to every birthday? Now, Jess, my mother began, her tone placating. We know this is disappointing, but Hartfield State is much more affordable, and with your grades, you're sure to get some kind of academic scholarship. Amber finally spoke up. It's not like you've ever been as invested in college as I have, Jess. You barely talk about it, and this is my one shot at going pro eventually. I stared at them, these 3 people who were supposed to be my family, who had once again made it abundantly clear where I stood in their priorities. The $85,000 that had been earmarked for my education, gone. Redirected to ensure Amber could attend her dream school, while I was expected to piece together my future from whatever scraps remained. I have to go, I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. I can't be late for my interview. We can discuss options when you get back, my father called as I headed for the door. Maybe a work-study program or commuting from home to save on expenses. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I don't remember driving to Hartfield State. My body operated on autopilot while my mind spun with betrayal and disbelief. I arrived early for my interview and sat in my car, trying to compose myself. This was the opportunity Uncle David had encouraged me to pursue. I couldn't let my family's latest dismissal derail it. But as I stared at the imposing university buildings, doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was reaching beyond my station by aspiring to a prestigious scholarship. Maybe my place really was in the background, making do with less while Amber took center stage. For a moment, one dark, terrible moment, I considered driving away, giving up, accepting the narrative that had been written for me since childhood. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle David. Believe in yourself today. I do. 7 simple words that anchored me back to reality. I took a deep breath, grabbed my portfolio, and stepped out of the car. I would have this interview. I would give it everything I had. Not because I expected to win, but because I had promised Uncle David and myself that I would stop hiding. My light. The interview panel consisted of 3 professors, including the Dean of Computer Science and 2 current scholarship recipients. For 2 hours, they questioned me about my projects, my goals, my vision for technology's role in society. I presented my algorithm work, explained my research interests, and outlined my plans for future development in AI ethics. Somewhere during that interview, something shifted inside me. With each question, I answered confidently. With each nod of appreciation from the panel, I felt the weight of my family's dismissal lifting slightly. These strangers saw value in my mind, my work, my potential. They engaged with my ideas seriously, treated my ambitions as valid and worthwhile. As I walked out of the interview, the Dean of Computer Science shook my hand. "Impressive work, Ms. Mitchell," she said. "Professor Winters mentioned you've been developing these projects largely independently?" I hesitated, then acknowledged Uncle David's mentorship while confirming that the technical work had been my own. "That's what we look for in presidential scholars," she said. "Not just intelligence, but initiative and resilience. We'll be in touch very soon." I nodded, thanked the panel, and walked back to my car in a daze. For 2 hours, I had existed in a world where being Jessica Mitchell was enough, more than enough. Now I had to return to a reality where it never had been. The house was empty when I returned home. A note on the counter informed me that my parents had taken Amber shopping for dorm essentials for Westridge. The casual cruelty of it, going shopping for her college needs on the very day they'd informed me my college fund no longer existed, wasn't lost on me. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, emotionally exhausted from both the interview and the morning's revelation. As I changed out of my blazer, the flash drive Uncle David had given me fell from my pocket. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand, remembering there had been files on it I hadn't fully explored. Plugging it into my laptop, I navigated through the folders of recommendation letters and project documentation, eventually finding a folder simply labeled Future. Inside was a single document, a detailed accounting of a trust fund I'd never known existed. According to the document, my grandmother, my father's mother, had established educational trusts for both Amber and me before she passed away. The trusts were separate from the college funds our parents had been building. While the college funds were in our parents' names, the trusts were legally bound to each of us individually, to be accessed when we turned 18 or began higher education. The document included account numbers, contact information for the trust manager, and most crucially, a note from Uncle David. "Jessica, your grandmother believed in educational equity. She left identical trusts for both her grandchildren, regardless of their interests or talents. Your parents were informed of both trusts when she passed. I've been monitoring them as a secondary trustee. As of last month, Amber's trust has been emptied, transferred to your parents' account. Your trust remains untouched. I suggest contacting Mr. Harris at First National before any decisions are made about your education financing. Uncle David." I read the document 3 times, my hands shaking. There had been another fund, one my parents had known about all along. They had already tapped into Amber's portion, and now they were taking my college fund as well, leaving me with nothing, while directing all resources to my sister, or so they thought. The next morning, I called Mr. Harris at First National Bank. After verifying my identity, he confirmed everything in Uncle David's document. My educational trust from my grandmother contained just over $120,000, more than enough for 4 years at Hartfield State, even without scholarships. "Your uncle has been quite diligent in overseeing this trust," Mr. Harris explained. "He's actually managed to grow the principal through some conservative investments over the years." "And my parents, they know about this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Oh yes, Ms. Mitchell. They've been receiving annual statements since your grandmother established the trusts. In fact, they contacted us last week inquiring about accessing your portion, but as you've now turned 18, any changes require your signature." A cold clarity washed over me. My parents hadn't just decided to redirect my college fund to Amber. They had attempted to redirect my trust fund as well, fully intending to leave me with nothing. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Before I could process this revelation, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Professor Winters from Hartfield State. "Jessica, I'm pleased to inform you that the committee has reached a unanimous decision. We'd like to offer you the presidential scholarship covering full tuition, room and board, plus a research stipend for 4 years." I sat down hard on my bed. Thank you, I managed. That's incredible news. Your work is extraordinary, Jessica, and your interview impressed everyone. We believe you have tremendous potential. The formal letter will arrive next week, but I wanted to call personally. We're very excited to have you join us. After the call ended, I sat in silence, absorbing the monumental shift in my circumstances. In less than 24 hours, I had gone from believing my educational future had been sacrificed for Amber's to discovering I had not only financial security, but prestigious academic recognition. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards, and I had decisions to make about how to play them. I waited until dinner to make my move. My parents were in unusually good spirits, having spent the day securing Amber's spot at Westridge with the initial deposit, funded, no doubt, by my former college savings. So, Jess, my father began, passing the salad bowl, have you thought more about community college options? 2 years there, then maybe transfer to a state school. It could be very economical. I took a sip of water, composing myself. Actually, I've been meaning to ask you both something. Did Grandma Mitchell leave any money for our education? Like a trust fund or something similar? The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My father's perpetual confidence faltered visibly. Why do you ask? My mother responded, her voice overly casual. Just curious. Uncle David mentioned something about it during one of our study sessions. My father cleared his throat. Your grandmother left some money, yes, but it was a joint family educational fund, not individual trusts. We've been using it as needed for both of you girls. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, I almost admired the delivery. Almost. That's interesting, I said, pulling out my phone, because I spoke with Mr. Harris at First National this morning. Apparently, Grandma established 2 separate, equal trusts. One for Amber, one for me. The color drained from both my parents' faces. Amber looked genuinely confused. Wait, what trust fund? She asked. I thought all my college money was coming from my volleyball scholarship and the fund Mom and Dad set up. I turned to my sister. According to the bank, your trust fund, which was identical to mine at about $120,000, was emptied last year. Transferred to Mom and Dad's account. Amber's eyes widened, then narrowed as she turned to our parents. You said all that money was from your savings. You said you'd been sacrificing for years to build my college fund. My father's expression hardened. Now, girls, your mother and I have always made financial decisions with the family's best interests at heart. Amber's opportunities at Westridge will benefit all of us in the long run. And what about Jess's opportunities? Amber asked, surprising me with her sudden defense. If there were 2 equal trusts, why is all the money going to me? My mother jumped in, her voice strained. Sweetheart, your volleyball career is time-sensitive. Jessica can always return to college later if she wants to. We had to prioritize. I let the moment stretch until the tension became unbearable, then delivered the final blow. I received a call today. I've been awarded the Presidential Scholarship at Hartfield State. Full tuition, room and board, plus research stipends. Silence descended on the dining room. My father recovered first, his expression shifting to something that looked almost like pride, but which I recognized as calculation. That's wonderful news, Princess. See, we knew you'd find a way. And now, with your scholarship and your trust fund, you'll have extra money for graduate school or starting your career. I met his gaze steadily. My trust fund is going to remain exactly where it is for now, managed by the trustees Grandma appointed, Uncle David and Mr. Harris. I won't be touching it until I've completed my undergraduate degree. But, my mother started, and I won't be staying here this summer, I continued. Uncle David has arranged for me to participate in a pre-college research program at Hartfield. I'm moving into campus housing next week. My parents exchanged glances, clearly trying to process this rapid shift in power dynamics. Amber surprised me again by breaking into a genuine smile. Jess, that's amazing. A full ride? Why didn't you ever tell us you were that good at computer stuff? The innocent question landed like a slap. I looked at my sister, really looked, at her, and realized she was as much a product of our parents' manipulations as I was. She had been elevated, praised, and prioritized, while I had been sidelined. Neither of us had chosen these roles. I did tell you, I said quietly. All of you. For years. You just weren't listening. The fallout from my revelation unfolded differently with each family member. My father shifted tactics immediately, attempting to position himself as the proud parent who had always seen my potential. He talked about networking opportunities, offered to introduce me to clients with tech connections, and suggested we meet regularly to discuss my career strategy. My mother took a different approach, rewriting history with breathtaking confidence. We always knew you'd find your path, Jess. You've always been so independent, not needing the same guidance as your sister. It's one of the things we've admired most about you. The gaslighting was so blatant it would have been comical if it weren't so painful. Years of indifference couldn't be erased by this sudden, convenient revision of our family narrative. Most surprising was Amber's response. The morning after my announcement, she knocked on my bedroom door, something she hadn't done in years. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. I nodded, gesturing for her to enter. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking around at the room as if seeing it for the first time, taking in the programming books, the certificates I'd tacked to my bulletin board, the evidence of a passion and talent that had always existed parallel to her athletic achievements. "I didn't know," she said finally, "about the trust funds, about your scholarship competitions, about any of it." "I know," I replied, surprised to find I believed her. "I feel like such an idiot," she continued, running a hand through her hair. "All this time, I thought Mom and Dad were stretching themselves thin for my volleyball career. I had no idea they were, that they would. Use your trust fund without telling you, try to take mine too, redirect my college savings to your university deposit?" I finished for her. She winced. "It sounds awful when you say it out loud." "It is awful, Amber." She was quiet for a moment. "I called Westridge this morning. I'm declining their offer." This shocked me. "What? Why? Isn't that your dream school?" Amber shook her head. "Not anymore. Not knowing what it would cost you. I called Coach Reynolds at Hartfield State. They've been recruiting me too, just not as aggressively. Their volleyball program is ranked 12th nationally, still Division I, and their business school is actually better than Westridge's." "Us?" I stared at my sister, seeing something I'd never noticed before. Beneath the confidence and charm, she had a moral compass that our parents' manipulations hadn't managed to corrupt. "You don't have to do that," I said. "This isn't your fault." She met my gaze directly. "Maybe not, but I want to make it right. And honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to paying my own way, using what's left of my trust for tuition and earning the rest. Maybe we could even be on the same campus. Start over in a way." For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my sister. Not as competitors in our parents' zero-sum game, but as allies discovering our own paths. The summer stretched before me with unexpected possibilities. With my place at Hartfield secured and my financial situation stable, I had freedom I'd never anticipated. I moved into the summer housing program early, settling into a small apartment near Uncle David's faculty housing, allowing me to continue our work together while he completed his recovery. The distance from my parents was both physical and emotional. They continued to call and text, their messages oscillating between pride in my achievements, now that they had been validated by external recognition, and subtle attempts to regain control of the narrative and my trust fund. One evening in July, my father called with news. "We've had to postpone Amber's Westridge deposit," he said, his voice carefully casual. "There's been a temporary cash flow issue with the business." I understood the unspoken request immediately. He was hoping I would offer to release some of my trust fund, the money they had intended to redirect before I discovered it. Uncle David's words echoed in my mind. When the time comes, choose truth over bitterness. I could have taken satisfaction in their predicament. I could have pointed out the poetic justice in their current financial strain. I could have enjoyed watching them face the consequences of their manipulations. Instead, I said, "Amber told me she's planning to attend Hartfield State. Did she mention that to you?" My father's surprise was audible. "What? No, she's committed to Westridge. We've been planning." "You've been planning," I corrected gently. "Amber's been reconsidering. She says Hartfield's business program is actually better aligned with her goals." There was a long pause on the line. "I see," he finally said, though his tone suggested he didn't see it all. "And you two have been discussing this?" "We have," I confirmed. "We've been talking a lot, actually. About college, about the future, about how families should support each other." Another pause. "Jessica, your mother and I, we may have made some miscalculations in how we handled certain things." It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get. Not an acknowledgement of the years of preferential treatment, not a recognition of their attempted financial betrayal, just an admission of miscalculations. I could have demanded more. Part of me wanted to. But I realized that continuing to seek validation from people who had consistently denied it was its own form of prison. "We all make choices, Dad," I said instead. "I'm making mine now. I choose to move forward." August brought move-in day for regular freshmen, including Amber. True to her word, she had declined Westridge's offer and accepted a partial athletic scholarship to Hartfield, supplementing it with what remained in her trust. After our parents' withdrawals, I helped her carry boxes into her dormitory on the opposite side of campus from my summer housing. "So this is weird, right?" she said as we arranged her volleyball trophies on a shelf. Both Mitchell sisters at the same school, starting fresh. I smiled. "Good weird, I think." Our parents had driven her to campus but maintained a careful distance from me, still unsure how to navigate our new relationship. They hovered near Amber's door, my mother rearranging perfectly arranged items, my father checking and rechecking the security of the windows. "They're trying," Amber said quietly, nodding toward them. "In their own dysfunctional way. Dad's been meeting with a financial advisor to develop a repayment plan for my trust fund." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She nodded. "Uncle David's idea, apparently. He told them it was the only way to rebuild any kind of relationship with either of us." Uncle David, still orchestrating healing from behind the scenes. As if summoned by our thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Dinner at the faculty club tonight? Bringing my colleague Dr. Rahman from the AI ethics department. She's interested in discussing research assistant opportunities." I showed the message to Amber, who grinned. "Go, be brilliant. I've got a team mixer anyway." As I walked across the sunlit campus that afternoon, I felt a lightness that had nothing to do with the beautiful weather. For years, I had lived in the shadows, overlooked, underestimated, nearly defrauded of my educational future by the very people who should have championed it. But shadows don't exist without light. And sometimes it takes being plunged into darkness to recognize your own capacity for brightness. My parents had given my college savings to my more gifted sister, unaware I had secured not only a full scholarship, but a trust fund they couldn't touch. It could have been the beginning of a revenge story. Instead, it became something more powerful, a redemption story, not just for me, but potentially for our entire family. Uncle David had been right all along. The quietest ones in the room often make the biggest waves, not through grand gestures or public triumphs, but through the steady, persistent pursuit of their own truth. As I entered the faculty club that evening, ready to discuss research opportunities that aligned perfectly with my talents and ambitions, I realized that the greatest inheritance wasn't the money my grandmother had left, or even the scholarship I'd earned. It was the ability to finally see myself clearly, independent of the distorted mirror my family had held up for so many years. And that was a gift no one could ever take away. 2 years passed faster than I could have imagined. The rhythm of university life suited me. The intellectual challenges, the collaborative environment, the freedom to pursue research that lit a fire in my mind. Under Dr. Rahman's mentorship, I had published 2 papers on ethical AI frameworks that were beginning to gain attention in academic circles. My algorithm work had evolved into a comprehensive project examining bias in machine learning systems, something that tech companies were increasingly interested in addressing. Uncle David had recovered enough to return to teaching, though with a reduced course load. We still met twice weekly in his campus office, our mentor-mentee relationship evolving into a true partnership of minds. He never said "I told you so" about my successes, but his proud smile said everything his words didn't. Amber and I had settled into a new kind of sisterhood, not the forced proximity of our childhood home, but something chosen and deliberately cultivated. We met for coffee every Sunday, sharing stories about classes and commiserating over the universal challenges of college life. She had blossomed at Hartfield in ways neither of us had anticipated, discovering a talent for sports marketing that combined her athletic background with a surprisingly shrewd business mind. "You know what's weird?" she said one Sunday as we claimed our usual table at the study nook. "I think I like being just good at volleyball, not the star everyone's focused on. There's less pressure, more joy in it." I understood what she meant. We had both been shaped or misshapen by our parents' expectations and attention patterns. Freedom from those patterns had allowed us both to discover more authentic versions of ourselves. Our parents had attempted their own version of evolution, with mixed results. They maintained regular contact with Amber, calling weekly and visiting campus for her volleyball matches. Their outreach to me was more tentative, marked by awkward phone calls and occasional emails filled with links to computer science articles they thought might interest me. Their way of saying, "We see you now," without actually saying it. I kept a polite distance, neither rejecting their efforts nor fully embracing them. The wounds were too deep for easy healing, the trust too thoroughly broken for simple repair. But I had made peace with this imperfect resolution. I no longer needed their validation to know my worth. It was during my junior year that everything shifted again. I was preparing for midterm exams when I received an unexpected email from Eliza Chen, the founder of Nexus Innovations, one of the most progressive AI development companies in the country. "Ms. Mitchell," the email began, "your recent paper on mitigating algorithmic bias has caught our attention. We're particularly impressed by your practical framework for implementation, which addresses issues our industry has struggled to solve effectively. I'd like to discuss potential internship opportunities at Nexus for this summer, with the possibility of extending to a more permanent arrangement after your graduation. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to arrange a conversation." I stared at my screen, reading the message 3 times to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Nexus Innovations was the dream, the kind of company that appeared in 5-year plans and "Where do you see yourself?" essays. They were known for ethical innovation, diverse leadership, and creating technology that served humanitarian goals alongside commercial ones. My hands shaking slightly, I forwarded the email to Uncle David with a simple message, "Is this real?" His reply came minutes later. "Very real. Eliza Chen doesn't make these offers lightly. This is the opportunity you've been working toward, Jess. You've earned it." The internship interview process was rigorous. 4 rounds of technical assessments, problem-solving scenarios, and conversations with various team leaders. Throughout it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't like my scholarship interview, where I'd been desperate for external validation. Now I knew my value, understood what I could contribute. I approached each conversation with confidence born of genuine competence, not bravado. When the offer came, a summer position with a stipend generous enough to allow me to lease a small apartment in San Francisco, I accepted immediately. The opportunity to work alongside some of the most innovative minds in ethical AI development was everything I had been working toward. What I hadn't anticipated was my parents' reaction. The email from my father arrived the day after I signed my internship contract. "Your mother and I heard about your Nexus opportunity through Uncle David," he wrote. "We're incredibly proud and would like to take you to dinner next weekend to celebrate this achievement. Please let us know if Saturday would work for you." My immediate instinct was to decline. Our occasional family dinners were still exercises in careful conversation, characterized more by what remained unsaid than what was expressed. But something in the message's tone, a genuine pride, without the undercurrent of comparison that had defined my childhood, made me pause. I replied with a brief acceptance, setting boundaries by suggesting a restaurant near campus rather than making the trip home. When Saturday arrived, I found myself unexpectedly nervous, checking my appearance in the mirror with uncharacteristic attention. What was I trying to prove? And to whom? The restaurant was moderately upscale, with white tablecloths and soft lighting that created private islands of conversation. My parents were already seated when I arrived, both dressed more formally than our usual family dinners would warrant. My mother stood immediately, moving as if to embrace me before hesitating, reading the subtle body language that had become our emotional shorthand. Instead, she offered a warm smile and a gentle touch on my arm. "You look wonderful, Jessica," she said. And for once, it didn't sound like an automatic pleasantry. My father rose as well, extending his hand in an oddly formal gesture. "Congratulations on the Nexus position," he said. "It's quite an achievement." We settled into our seats, navigating the familiar awkwardness of ordering drinks and studying menus to avoid immediate conversation. Once the server had taken our orders and retreated, my father cleared his throat. "We've been following your progress," he said, his tone careful, measuring each word. "Your publications, your work with Dr. Rahman. Uncle David keeps us informed." I nodded, unsurprised. Uncle David had maintained his role as family bridge builder, sharing news of my achievements without violating my privacy. It was his way of trying to heal the family fracture, giving my parents glimpses of the daughter they had overlooked for so long. "Nexus Innovations is extremely selective," my mother added. "Their internship program accepts less than 1% of applicants?" I blinked, surprised by her knowledge. "Something like that," I confirmed. "How did you know?" A faint flush colored her cheeks. "I've been reading about them since you mentioned an interest in ethical AI development last Christmas." Last Christmas, our brief, stilted family gathering where I had answered their polite questions about my studies with minimal detail. I had mentioned Nexus in passing, never imagining my mother would actually research the company. "They're doing groundbreaking work," my father joined in, "particularly in healthcare applications. Their predictive models for treatment response have changed how certain conditions are managed." Now I was truly startled. My father, whose technological expertise had previously seemed limited to operating the television remote, was discussing AI applications in healthcare with reasonable accuracy. "We've been trying to understand," my mother said softly, reading my expression. "Your field, your interests. We've realized how little we knew about what truly matters to you." I felt a complex emotion rising, not quite forgiveness, but perhaps its precursor, an acknowledgement that they were, however belatedly, attempting to see me. "There's something else we wanted to discuss," my father said, his demeanor shifting to something more serious. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, placing it carefully on the table between us. "This is long overdue." I made no move to take it. "What is it?" "The remainder of your college fund," he replied, meeting my gaze directly. "What was meant to be yours before we redirected it? We've spent the past 2 years rebuilding it. The amount has been restored with interest." My mother leaned forward. "We know money doesn't erase what happened, Jessica. But we want you to have what was always intended for your future. No strings attached." I stared at the envelope, emotions churning. The money itself wasn't life-changing. Between my scholarship and trust fund, I had sufficient resources for my education. But the gesture represented something more significant, an admission of wrongdoing, an attempt at concrete amends rather than empty words. "Why now?" I asked, finally looking up at them. My father's expression was uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Because we finally understand what we did. Not just taking the money, though that was inexcusable, but all the years before. The way we failed to see you," my mother finished when he faltered. "How we measured both our daughters against such different standards. How we justified our choices by convincing ourselves Amber needed more support, more recognition." "We were wrong," my father said simply. "And while we can't change the past, we can at least try to make this one thing right." I reached for the envelope, not yet opening it, but acknowledging the gesture. "Thank you," I said, quietly. "This means something." The rest of dinner passed in a strange new territory between estrangement and reconciliation. We avoided the heaviest topics, but engaged in genuine conversation about my research, Amber's sports marketing projects, the changes at Hartfield State. For the first time in memory, my parents asked questions and actually listened to the answers, without their attention drifting to my sister's achievements or their own concerns. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, my mother hesitated, then spoke with unexpected directness. "We're proud of you, Jessica. Not because of Nexus or your publications or any external validation. We're proud of who you've become. Your integrity, your resilience. Qualities you developed despite us, not because of us." The words hung in the air between us, honest in a way our family interactions rarely were. I didn't rush to absolve them, or minimize the truth of her statement. Instead, I simply nodded, acknowledging both the compliment and the admission it contained. "I should get back to campus," I said. "I have an early meeting with my research group tomorrow." "Of course," my father replied. "But perhaps, would Sunday dinner be possible sometimes, when your schedule permits?" I considered the request, weighing my own emotional boundaries against the genuine effort they seemed to be making. "Not every Sunday," I said finally. "But sometimes. Yes." The relief in their expressions was palpable, though tempered with understanding that this was a small step, not a complete resolution. As we parted ways in the restaurant parking lot, my mother touched my arm again, her fingers light but present. "We're trying to learn how to be better parents to the daughter we have," she said quietly. "Not the daughter we thought we wanted. It's a process we should have started years ago." I drove back to campus that night with the envelope on the passenger seat beside me, still unopened. The money it contained was simultaneously significant and almost irrelevant. What mattered was what it represented. Not just the restoration of funds that had been wrongfully diverted, but the beginning of a restoration of truth in a family built on convenient fictions. The San Francisco summer unfolded like a dream. Intense, challenging, occasionally overwhelming, but exactly where I was meant to be. Nexus Innovations exceeded even my high expectations. Their headquarters in a renovated industrial building south of Market Street hummed with collaborative energy, teams of diverse thinkers approaching problems from angles I hadn't considered. My project focused on developing more equitable healthcare, algorithms trying to eliminate the biases that had plagued earlier systems. The work was demanding, but deeply satisfying, applying theoretical principles to solve tangible problems that affected real lives. My team lead, Dr. Imani Washington, became both mentor and advocate, pushing me to refine my approaches while creating opportunities for my work to be seen by company leadership. "You have something rare, Jessica," she told me during our midpoint: evaluation. Technical brilliance combined with ethical clarity. Many developers can code elegantly, but fewer understand the human implications of the systems they build. I thought often of Uncle David during those summer months, how he had recognized something in me that my own family had missed, how he had nurtured not just my technical skills, but my understanding of technology's wider impact. Without his guidance, I might have developed the same abilities, but lacked the framework to apply them meaningfully. Halfway through the internship, Eliza Chen herself requested a meeting. I arrived at her office, surprisingly minimalist for the founder of a billion-dollar company, nervous but prepared. She wasted no time on pleasantries. "Your healthcare algorithm modifications are impressive," she said, gesturing to the tablet in front of her. "Dr. Washington tells me you've achieved a 47% reduction in demographic disparities while maintaining overall predictive accuracy." "There's still room for improvement," I replied, "particularly in addressing intersectional factors." She smiled. "Slightly. Always the case with worthwhile work. Tell me, what do you see as the most significant ethical challenge facing AI development in the next decade?" The question launched a 45-minute conversation that ranged from technical specifics to broader philosophical considerations about technology's role in society. Throughout, Eliza probed not just my knowledge, but my reasoning, my values, my vision for how AI could serve humanity, rather than simply accelerate existing power structures. As our time concluded, she leaned back in her chair, studying me with an evaluative gaze I couldn't quite interpret. "Most interns focus solely on impressing us enough to secure a job offer," she said finally. "You seem more interested in the work itself." I considered my response carefully. "The work has purpose beyond career advancement. At least it should." She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "We'd like to extend your internship through your senior year, Jessica. Remote work, flexible hours to accommodate your studies, with a guaranteed position after graduation, should both parties find the arrangement beneficial." The offer took me by surprise. Extended internships weren't unheard of, but they were typically reserved for doctoral candidates or particularly exceptional contributors. Before I could formulate a response, Eliza continued, "Your work here matters. The healthcare algorithm project alone could impact millions of patients. We believe in investing in talent that aligns with our mission. Think about it. Discuss with your academic advisors. Let us know by next week." I called Uncle David that evening from my small sublet apartment, the San Francisco fog rolling in outside my window as I described the unexpected offer. "They must be impressed indeed," he said, pride evident in his voice. "Though I'm not surprised. Your work has always had exceptional clarity." "What would you do?" I asked, valuing his perspective as I always had. He was quiet for a moment. "This isn't about what I would do, Jess. It's about what serves your goals, your vision for your future. What does your intuition tell you?" I considered the question seriously. That this is where I'm meant to be. The work feels important, purposeful, and the team, they approach problems the way I do, with both technical rigor and ethical consideration. "Then I think you have your answer," he replied simply. After consulting with Dr. Rahman and my academic advisors, I accepted Nexus's offer. My senior year would be busier than anticipated, balancing advanced coursework with remote work for the company. But the opportunity to continue meaningful project development outweighed the challenges. When I returned to campus that fall, everything felt different. The trajectory of my future had clarified, revealing a path forward that aligned perfectly with my strengths and values. The insecure, overlooked girl who had arrived at Hartfield 3 years earlier had been replaced by a young woman confident in her abilities and clear about her purpose. My relationship with my parents continued its cautious evolution. Sunday. Dinners became a monthly occurrence, not always comfortable but increasingly genuine. They asked thoughtful questions about my work at Nexus, made efforts to understand the technical aspects of my research, and most importantly, listened when I spoke. During one such dinner in October, my father mentioned a family gathering planned for Thanksgiving. "Your aunt and uncle will be there," he said carefully. "And Amber, of course. We were hoping you might join us." I hesitated, weighing the invitation. Family holidays carried emotional weight, resurrecting old dynamics and expectations. Yet I also recognized the effort this invitation represented, an acknowledgement of my place in the family, an attempt to reintegrate me into the fold without erasing the past. "I'd like that," I said finally. "Though I'll need to leave early Friday. I have a video conference with the Nexus team." The relief in my mother's expression was evident. "Of course. Whatever works with your schedule." Thanksgiving arrived. Crisp and clear, the drive to my parents' home filled with memories both painful and formative. As I parked in the driveway, I noticed subtle changes to the house. The volleyball trophies that had once dominated the living room display had been rearranged, making space for framed copies of my published papers and a photograph of me with the Nexus team. Amber arrived shortly after I did, bringing her roommate Rachel, who couldn't travel home for the holiday. We fell into easy conversation in the kitchen, helping our mother prepare sides while our father managed the turkey with his usual methodical approach. "How's the Nexus project going?" Amber asked, genuinely interested in a way that still sometimes surprised me. "The healthcare algorithm thing." I described our recent breakthrough in reducing false negatives for underrepresented populations, watching my sister's face as she followed the explanation. "That's going to help a lot of people," she said when I finished. "Like, actual lives improved because you figured out this code thing." "That's pretty amazing, Jess." My mother, overhearing, paused in her vegetable chopping. "It is amazing," she agreed, her voice warm with an emotion I was still learning to accept as genuine pride. "Your sister has always had a mind for solving problems that matter." The simple acknowledgement, "always had," contained volumes. An admission that my abilities and interests had existed long before they'd been recognized or valued by my family. A retrospective correction to years of oversight. Dinner itself was surprisingly pleasant. Uncle David, still serving his family, mediator but now with a lighter touch, guided conversation toward neutral topics and gently redirected when tension threatened. Aunt Marissa shared stories from her art gallery. Amber and Rachel entertained everyone with tales of dorm life mishaps, and my parents maintained their new practice of actually listening when others spoke. After dessert, as everyone settled into comfortable conversation in the living room, my father quietly asked if I would join him in his study. Curious, I followed him into the small room that had once been intimidating territory, the space where family financial discussions happened, where decisions were made that shaped our lives. He closed the door partway, not for secrecy, but for a measure of privacy. On his desk sat a large envelope and what appeared to be legal documents. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his tone more serious than it had been all day. "About the past, about making amends in meaningful ways." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "When your grandmother established those trusts for you and Amber, she had specific intentions: educational opportunity, financial security as you started your adult lives. We violated those intentions." He paused, clearly uncomfortable, but pressing on. "We've been working with a financial advisor to address that violation properly." He handed me the envelope. Inside was a detailed accounting of my grandmother's original trust, the amounts that had been diverted to Amber's Westridge plans, and a structured repayment that had restored the fund to what would have been its current value had it remained untouched. "We've already replaced what was taken from your college fund," he continued. "This completes the financial restoration, but we know money alone doesn't address the deeper harm." He hesitated, then pushed the legal documents toward me. "We've updated our will and established a new trust. Equal provisions for both you and Amber, with independent trustees to ensure proper management." I looked up from the papers, startled by this formal acknowledgement of past inequity and attempt at future correction. "This isn't about buying forgiveness," he added quickly, reading my expression. "It's about demonstrating in concrete terms that we understand the damage our favoritism caused, that we're committed to never repeating those patterns." The gesture was simultaneously necessary and almost beside the point. The financial inequity had been a symptom of a much deeper imbalance, the uneven distribution of love, attention, validation, and support throughout my childhood. Yet I recognized the significance of my father's actions. For a man whose emotional language had always been limited, this was a profound statement. "Thank you," I said simply. "This matters." He nodded, seeming to understand both what I was acknowledging and what remained unaddressed. "Your mother and we've been seeing a family therapist," he admitted, the confession clearly difficult for him. Learning to recognize patterns we didn't even know we were perpetuating. It's been enlightening and humbling. This revelation surprised me more than the financial amendments. My parents, seeking professional guidance to understand their own behavior, represented a level of self-reflection I hadn't thought them capable of. "We'd like you to join us sometime," he continued. "Only if you're comfortable, of course. Dr. Levine thinks it might be helpful for all of us to address certain things together. But there's no pressure." I considered the invitation, weighing my own emotional boundaries against the potential for deeper healing. "I'll think about it," I promised. "I can't right now, with everything at school and Nexus. But maybe during winter break." He accepted this with a nod, neither pushing for more nor seeming disappointed by my hesitation. Another small sign of growth, respecting my boundaries rather than imposing familial expectations. As we rejoined the others in the living room, I caught Uncle David watching me with a questioning glance. I gave him a subtle nod, "I'm okay," and settled back into the gathering, with a strange new feeling taking root. Not quite forgiveness, not yet reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of both. Later that evening, as guests were departing and Amber was helping our mother with final kitchen cleanup, Uncle David drew me aside on the front porch. "Your father mentioned their plans to address the trust situation," he said, his breath visible in the cool night air. "How are you feeling about it all?" I considered the question seriously. "It's a gesture I didn't expect," I admitted. "Not just the money, but the acknowledgement behind it." "They're trying," he agreed. "Imperfectly, but genuinely." "Did you know they're seeing a therapist?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "I may have suggested it several times over several years. They finally became ready to listen." I leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd grown up feeling invisible. "I don't know if things can ever be truly fixed between us." "Perhaps fixed isn't the right framework," he suggested gently. "Some things, once broken, don't go back to their original state. They become something new instead, something that incorporates the break rather than erasing it." The Japanese art of kintsugi came to mind. Broken pottery repaired with gold, highlighting the damage rather than hiding it, creating beauty from brokenness without denying its reality. "I'm not looking to forget," I said, "but I think I'm ready to start building something new, whatever that might be." Uncle David nodded, his expression reflective. "That's all anyone can really ask for. The chance to create something better than what came before." As I drove back to campus that night, the conversation lingered. My family had been irrevocably altered by the revelations of 2 years ago. The trust funds, the scholarship, the pattern of favoritism laid bare. We would never return to what we had been before, nor would I want to. But perhaps we could evolve into something healthier, more authentic, more equitable. The road ahead would be neither straight nor simple. Old patterns had a way of reasserting themselves. New awareness didn't automatically translate to transformed behavior. Yet for the first time, I felt genuinely hopeful about the possibility of a family relationship based on truth rather than convenient fiction, on seeing each other clearly rather than through the distorted lens of parental expectations and sibling rivalry. My phone buzzed with a text from Amber. "Thanks for coming today. It meant a lot to everyone, especially Mom and Dad. Call me tomorrow? I want to hear more about your Nexus project." I smiled, typing a quick affirmative response. Of all the unexpected developments of the past 2 years, my evolving relationship with my sister might be the most surprising and the most valuable. We were learning to know each other as adults, free from the roles we'd been assigned as children. As I approached campus, my phone buzzed again. An email notification from Eliza Chen. Additional funding approved for healthcare algorithm expansion. Team meeting tomorrow to discuss implementation timeline. Your predictive model adjustments were the key factor in securing board approval. Well done. Professional validation, personal growth, family healing, all unfolding simultaneously, creating a life I could never have imagined when my parents had casually informed me they had given away my college fund. That moment of betrayal had sparked a chain of revelations and transformations, ultimately leading not to bitterness, but to something approaching wisdom. The campus came into view, lights illuminating the historic buildings against the dark sky. This place that had offered me not just education, but emancipation, freedom to become myself beyond the limiting narratives of my childhood. I thought of Uncle David's words from years ago. Sometimes the quietest ones in the room end up making the biggest waves. He had been right, though not in the way either of us had anticipated. The waves I was making weren't about power or retribution. They were about creating ripples of positive change, in healthcare algorithms that would serve patients more equitably, in family dynamics that were slowly healing, in my own understanding of resilience and worth. As I parked and walked toward my dormitory, I remembered the scholarship interview that had changed everything. How terrified I'd been. How close I'd come to giving up before I'd even begun. How different my life would have been if I'd surrendered to the narrative my family had created for me. Instead, I had found my voice, my path, my strength. I had discovered that validation from others is meaningful only when it reflects an authentic inner knowing. A confidence built not on external approval, but on the solid foundation of one's own demonstrated capabilities. My parents had given my college savings to my more gifted sister, unaware I would secure not just a full scholarship, but my rightful inheritance and eventually a promising career. They had underestimated me in every possible way, a mistake they were only now beginning to fully comprehend. But their underestimation had prompted a journey of self-discovery that had led me exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes the greatest gift is being underestimated. It forces you to prove your worth not just to others, but to yourself. My alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., though I had been awake for nearly an hour already, staring at the ceiling of my San Francisco apartment as dawn slowly illuminated the room. Today marked exactly 15 years since the moment my parents had casually informed me they were giving my college fund to Amber. 15 years since the betrayal that had unexpectedly set me on the path to where I now stood. 15 years of building a life I never could have imagined while sitting at that kitchen table, watching my dreams crumble before my eyes. I rose and moved through my morning routine mechanically, my mind elsewhere. The spacious apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay and minimalist furnishings that reflected my preference for elegant functionality, was a far cry from the cramped bedroom of my childhood home where I had once felt invisible. The woman I glimpsed in the bathroom mirror, confident, accomplished, dressed in a tailored suit that conveyed quiet authority, bore little resemblance to the overlooked younger sister who had spent years seeking validation that never came. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Imani Washington, my closest colleague and friend. Car service confirmed for 7:30. Media briefing at 9 chow. You ready for this? Today was significant for reasons beyond personal anniversaries. After 7 years of research, development, and rigorous testing, our healthcare algorithm was being implemented nationwide through a partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services. What had begun as a small project at the Lowell Institute had evolved into a comprehensive system designed to eliminate demographic biases in medical diagnostics, potentially impacting millions of patients who had historically received inequitable care. I texted back a quick affirmative, trying to focus on the professional milestone rather than the echoes of the past that had been haunting me since I woke. The timing was coincidental but symbolically perfect. Exactly 15 years after my family had shown me my place in their hierarchy, I would be standing at a podium in Washington, D.C., announcing a project that could transform healthcare delivery across the country. As I gathered my presentation materials, my phone rang, Uncle David calling right on schedule. Now, in his late 70s, he had developed a habit of calling before any significant professional event, offering the steady support that had sustained me since those afternoons in his study when I was a teenager. "The big day," he said when I answered, his voice still strong despite his advancing years. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted, settling onto the couch. "But ready. The technical aspects are solid. We've run every test imaginable. It's the political and bureaucratic hurdles I'm worried about. If anyone can navigate those waters, it's you," he replied with characteristic confidence. "You've always had a gift for explaining complex concepts in ways that make their importance clear, even to non-technical audiences." We chatted for a few more minutes about the logistics of the day ahead before he shifted to a more personal topic. "Have you heard from your parents?" The question sent a familiar twinge through me. My relationship with my parents had evolved significantly over the years, moving from the betrayal and confrontation of that difficult period through tentative reconciliation to something resembling mutual respect. They had made genuine efforts to understand my work, to acknowledge the damage their favoritism had caused, to build a more balanced family dynamic. Yet certain wounds healed slowly, if ever completely. "They sent flowers yesterday," I told him, "and a card. They wanted to come to D.C. for the announcement, but Dad's knee surgery made travel difficult." "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question seriously, as I always did when Uncle David asked about my emotional landscape. Relieved, honestly. Having them there would add another layer of complexity to an already stressful day. But also, a little disappointed. "That doesn't make sense, does it?" "It makes perfect sense," he assured me. Family relationships are never straightforward, especially when they've included significant hurt. It's natural to both want their recognition and to protect yourself from potential disappointment. After we hung up, I moved to the window, watching the early morning fog roll across the bay. Uncle David had been my anchor through every phase of this journey, from the frightened, betrayed teenager to the scholarship student, to the rising professional to my current role as Director of Ethical AI Applications at the Lowell Institute. His belief in me had never wavered, his guidance never tainted by the complicated dynamics that characterized my relationship with my parents. The intercom buzzed, announcing the car service's arrival. I gathered my things, took one last look around the apartment, and headed downstairs. The driver, a middle-aged woman with a friendly smile, held the door for me. "Big day?" she asked, noticing my formal attire and the portfolio tucked under my arm. "Life-changing, potentially," I replied, settling into the back seat. "Though not for me personally, for millions of patients, if everything goes according to plan." As we pulled away from my building, I found myself thinking about the long, winding path that had led to this moment. The college years at Hartfield State, where my full scholarship and trust fund had provided both education and independence. The internships that had opened doors to increasingly meaningful work. The mentors who had recognized and fostered my talents. The professional challenges that had tested and ultimately strengthened my resolve. And through it all, the complicated evolution of my family relationships. The slow, imperfect healing of wounds that had once seemed irreparable. The airport was unusually quiet for a Wednesday morning. I moved through security efficiently, boarded the flight to DC, and spent the journey reviewing my presentation materials one final time. The algorithms at the heart of our system had been refined through years of testing against diverse patient datasets, with particular attention to historically underserved populations. The results were remarkable: a 62% reduction in diagnostic disparities while maintaining overall accuracy. Lives would be saved by this technology, particularly among demographics that had long received inferior care due to systemic biases. Dr. Washington met me at Reagan National, her tall figure easy to spot in the arrival area. "Ready to make history?" she asked, embracing me briefly before leading me to another waiting car. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, sliding into the back seat beside her. "Final media count? 23 outlets confirmed, including all major networks. The secretary will speak first, then introduce you for the technical overview." We spent the drive to our hotel reviewing last-minute details and addressing potential questions. Dr. Washington, who had been with the project since its inception, complemented my technical expertise with her clinical background, a physician programmer. Partnership that had proved invaluable in developing a system that worked not just in theory, but in practical medical settings. "By the way," she said as we neared the hotel, "there's a small reception after the announcement. Some key supporters wanted to meet the team behind the algorithm." I nodded absently, scrolling through email notifications that had accumulated during the flight. Then I froze, seeing a message from an unexpected sender. Amber. The subject line read simply, "Surprise." I opened it cautiously. My relationship with my sister had undergone its own complex evolution over the years. After the initial confrontation about the diverted college fund and trust, we had gradually established a more authentic connection, one based on who we actually were, rather than the roles we'd been assigned in our family system. She had built a successful career as a sports psychologist, often working with young athletes struggling under parental expectations, using her own experience as the golden child to help others resist similar pressures. The email was brief. "Couldn't miss my brilliant sister's big moment. See you at the announcement. Love, A." "Everything okay?" Dr. Washington asked, noting my expression. "My sister's coming to the announcement," I said, still processing this unexpected development. "She didn't mention it when we spoke last week. Is that a problem?" I considered the question. 15 years ago, Amber's presence would have triggered all my insecurities, the fear of being overshadowed, overlooked, diminished. Now, after years of building both professional confidence and a healthier relationship with her, I found I was actually pleased by the surprise. "No," I said finally. "Not a problem. Just unexpected." After checking into the hotel and freshening up, I met with our technical team for final preparation. The 6 brilliant minds who had helped develop various aspects of the algorithm gathered in my suite. Reviewing the demonstration materials and addressing last-minute questions from the Department of Health and Human Services staff. "Remember," I told them as our meeting concluded, "what matters most isn't the technical elegance, though that's substantial, but the real-world impact. Every improvement in diagnostic accuracy represents patients getting appropriate care they might otherwise have missed. That's what this is about." They nodded, their expressions reflecting the same mix of nervous anticipation and pride I felt. Myself. We had built something meaningful, something that embodied the principles Uncle David had instilled in me years ago about technology serving humanity rather than the other way around. After they departed, I changed into the outfit I'd carefully selected for the announcement, a tailored navy suit that conveyed professionalism without ostentation. As I fastened the simple silver necklace that had been a gift from Uncle David on my college graduation, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated only briefly before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Jessica?" She greeted me, her voice warm. "I just wanted to call before your big announcement. Your father's here too. We're on speakerphone." "Hi, Jess." My father's voice joined in. "How are you feeling about today?" The casual normality of their question, parents checking in before a child's big moment, struck me as both ordinary and extraordinary. For so many years, such attention had been reserved exclusively for Amber. The gradual shift in our family dynamic had been years in the making, built through difficult conversations, family therapy sessions, and genuine efforts on all sides. "Nervous but prepared," I told them honestly. "It's been a long road to get here." "We're so proud of you," my mother said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice, a tone that once would have seemed foreign coming from her, at least directed toward me. "Your grandmother would be especially proud. Using her trust to build something that helps so many people, it's exactly what she would have wanted." The mention of my grandmother, whose trust fund had provided the foundation for my education when my parents diverted my college savings, sent an unexpected wave of emotion through me. I had never known her well. She had passed away when I was young. But her legacy, both financial and otherwise, had shaped my path in ways none of us could have anticipated. "Did she work in medicine?" I asked, realizing I knew little about her professional life. "She was a pediatrician," my father replied. "One of the first women in her medical school class. Your algorithm, helping ensure fair diagnosis across demographics. She would have understood the importance immediately." The connection I'd never recognized suddenly seemed obvious. My grandmother's medical career, her commitment to educational opportunity through the trusts she established, my current work in healthcare algorithms, a through line I hadn't appreciated until this moment. "I wish I'd known her better," I said quietly. "You're more like her than you know," my mother replied. "Not just the intelligence, but the determination, the unwillingness to accept the status quo when it's clearly flawed." We talked for a few more minutes about logistics, their plans to watch the live stream of the announcement, their scheduled visit to San Francisco the following month, updates on my father's knee rehabilitation. As we prepared to hang up, my father's voice took on a more serious tone. "Jessica, before you go, your mother and we know we can never fully make up for the years when we failed to see you clearly, to value you appropriately. But watching you build this remarkable career, this meaningful work, we couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become. And we're grateful for the chance to know that woman, even if we were slow to recognize her." The words settled over me like a gentle weight, not heavy enough to burden, but substantial enough to feel. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot to me." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the conversation. My parents had been working for years to repair what they had broken. Not just the financial betrayal of diverting my college fund, but the deeper harm of the chronic overlooking, the persistent favoritism, the fundamental failure to see me clearly. Their efforts weren't perfect, but they were genuine and consistent. The healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely, but it was real. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Washington. "Car waiting downstairs whenever you're ready." I gathered my materials and headed down to the lobby, where Imani waited with 2 other team members. Together, we rode to the Department of Health and Human Services headquarters, where the press conference would take place. The car was quiet. each of us absorbed in our own thoughts about the significance of what we were about to announce. The building's grand entrance was lined with security personnel and media representatives. Inside, we were escorted to a preparation room adjacent to the auditorium where the announcement would take place. Through the partially open door, I could see the audience assembling: journalists, healthcare administrators, government officials, advocacy group representatives. And then, scanning the crowd, I spotted her. Amber, her blonde hair now styled in a sophisticated bob, dressed elegantly as she took a seat in the second row. Beside her sat a man I didn't recognize immediately, until he turned slightly and I realized with a start that it was Tyler Reynolds, Amber's husband of 10 years now, though I still sometimes thought of him as her college boyfriend. Before I could process this surprise further, a staff member approached. "Ms. Mitchell, the secretary is ready for a brief meeting before the announcement." I nodded, following her through a series of corridors to a small conference room where the Secretary of Health and Human Services waited. Dr. Eleanor Winters, appointed 2 years earlier after a distinguished career in public health, rose to greet me with a warm handshake. "Ms. Mitchell, or should I say Dr. Mitchell given your recent honorary doctorate," she said with a smile. "Thank you for making the time for this conversation before we go on stage." "It's an honor, Madam Secretary," I replied, taking the offered seat across from her. "And Jessica is fine." She nodded, getting straight to business. "I've reviewed the briefing materials on your algorithm extensively. The potential impact is remarkable. Precisely the kind of innovation we need to address long-standing disparities in our healthcare system. We discussed implementation timelines, training requirements for medical staff, and monitoring systems to ensure the algorithm performed as expected in diverse real-world settings." Throughout the conversation, I was struck by the secretary's grasp of both technical and ethical considerations. Her questions probing not just what the system could do, but how it would serve patients most equitably. "One final question," she said as our time drew to a close. "This project represents years of your life, significant intellectual investment, yet you've insisted on making the core framework open source rather than proprietary. Why?" I considered my response carefully. "Because healthcare equity isn't a competitive advantage, it's a fundamental right. Proprietary systems, no matter how well designed, inevitably create access disparities. Making the framework open source ensures it can be implemented, refined, and expanded by any healthcare system, regardless of their resources." She studied me for a moment, then nodded with evident approval. Exactly the answer I hoped for. "Shall we make history together, Jessica?" We walked together to the auditorium, where the buzz of conversation quieted as we entered through a side door. The stage was arranged with a podium, screens for the demonstration, and chairs for key participants. As I took my designated seat, I scanned the audience again, finding Amber's face among the crowd. She caught my eye and gave a subtle thumbs up, her expression conveying genuine pride. The secretary's opening remarks were concise and powerful, contextualizing our algorithm within broader efforts to address healthcare disparities. When she introduced me, the spotlight shifted literally and figuratively as I moved to the podium. "Good morning," I began, surveying the assembled crowd. 15 years ago today, I sat at my family's kitchen table and was told that my college fund, money I had counted on for my education, had been given to my sister instead. The unexpected opening caught the audience's attention immediately. From the corner of my eye, I saw Amber's slight start of surprise, but I continued steadily. That moment, painful as it was, set in motion a series of events that led directly to what we're announcing today. It pushed me to secure a full scholarship to college. It led me to discover a trust fund my grandmother had established specifically for my education. Most importantly, it forced me to recognize that my value wasn't determined by others' assessment, that I had capabilities and contributions to make, regardless of whether they were recognized by those closest to me. I paused, letting the personal context settle before shifting to the professional announcement. The algorithm we're implementing today addresses a problem not unlike what I experienced personally: the systematic undervaluing of certain individuals based on characteristics beyond their control. In healthcare, this manifests as diagnostic and treatment disparities that quite literally cost lives. From there, I moved into a detailed but accessible explanation of the algorithm's development, testing, and projected impact. The screens behind me displayed key data points, sample diagnostic pathways, and implementation timelines. Throughout the presentation, I emphasized not just the technical innovation, but the human impact, the patients who would receive more accurate diagnoses, more appropriate treatments, more equitable care because of this system. As I concluded and opened the floor for questions, I felt a profound sense of alignment between my personal journey and professional purpose, between the betrayal that had once seemed devastating and the path it had ultimately revealed. The questions from journalists and healthcare representatives were incisive but fair, focused primarily on implementation details and measurement frameworks for success. After the formal press conference concluded, the secretary hosted a small reception in an adjacent room. As I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and addressing follow-up inquiries, I felt a hand on my arm. Turning, I found myself face-to-face with Amber. "That was incredible, Jess," she said, embracing me warmly, "though I wasn't expecting to feature in your opening remarks." I returned the hug, genuinely glad for her presence. "Sorry about that. It just felt important to acknowledge how this all started. You okay with it?" She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "More than okay. It's the truth, after all. And look where it led you, changing healthcare for millions of people. Pretty good outcome from a terrible beginning." Tyler joined us, offering his own congratulations before being pulled into a conversation with one of the technical team, members who recognized him from his work in educational technology. Amber and I found a quiet corner where we could speak more privately. "Mom and Dad watched the live stream," she told me. "Dad texted me right after, said he was bursting with pride," direct quote. I smiled, imagining my father, who had once dismissed my computer science interests as merely practical, now thoroughly invested in my career. "They've come a long way." "We all have," Amber agreed. "Remember when we couldn't be in the same room without all that tension? The competition neither of us had chosen but both felt trapped by?" I did remember the years when Amber's every achievement had seemed to diminish me, when my successes had gone unnoticed or unvalued while hers were celebrated elaborately. How that dynamic had poisoned not just our relationship with our parents, but with each other. "I used to resent you," I admitted quietly. "Not because of anything you did personally, but because of what you represented. The golden child who got everything I wanted: attention, validation, financial support." "I know," she said simply. "And I used to feel guilty but also protective of my position. Like if I acknowledged how unfairly you were treated, I might lose the spot I'd been given. It was all so messed up. And now look at us, having an honest conversation at my major career announcement, which you flew across the country to attend." She smiled, her expression softening. "Wouldn't have missed it. Plus, we're extending the trip into a mini vacation. Tyler has meetings in New York next week, so we're making an East Coast tour of it." We were interrupted by Dr. Washington, who needed me for a conversation with a hospital system administrator. As I excused myself, Amber caught my hand briefly. "Jess," she said, her voice suddenly serious. "I've never properly said this, but I'm sorry. For benefiting from their favoritism all those years, for not speaking up sooner, for taking your college fund, even though I didn't know that's what was happening at the time." The apology, unexpected and heartfelt, touched something deep within me. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." The reception continued for another hour, a blend of professional networking and celebration. As it wound down, Dr. Washington approached with an unexpected suggestion. A group of us are having dinner at the Hamilton tonight. More informal, to celebrate properly. Your sister and brother-in-law would be welcome too. I relayed the invitation to Amber, who accepted enthusiastically. By 8 o'clock, our group had settled into a private dining room at the upscale restaurant. The technical team, key HHS staff members, Amber and Tyler, and me. Wine flowed freely as conversation shifted from the day's professional triumph to more personal topics. To Jessica Mitchell, Dr. Washington proposed as dessert was served, raising her glass, whose brilliant mind and moral compass have created something truly transformative. The toast was met with enthusiastic agreement. As others added their own words of appreciation, I found myself oddly emotional, not just because of the professional recognition, but because of the journey it represented. From the overlooked younger daughter to the scholarship student to the respected professional whose work would impact countless lives, a path I could never have envisioned sitting at that kitchen table 15 years ago today. Later, as the evening was winding down, I slipped away to the restaurant's quiet outdoor patio for a moment of solitude. The Washington Monument glowed. In the distance, its reflection shimmering in the Potomac River. I pulled out my phone and called Uncle David, knowing he would still be awake despite the late hour. It went perfectly, I told him when he answered. The secretary was fully on board, the questions were substantive, the media coverage is looking positive so far. I watched online, he said, his voice warm with pride. Couldn't have been better. Your opening, connecting the personal betrayal to the larger mission, that was powerful. It felt right somehow, acknowledging where it all began. Full circle, he agreed. Though I suspect your grandmother had a hand in this path long before that moment at the kitchen table. Some legacies work in ways we don't immediately recognize. We talked for a few more minutes about the technical aspects of the presentation before his tone shifted slightly. Your mother called me right after. This surprised me. Though the strained relationship between Uncle David and my parents had gradually improved over the years, they rarely initiated contact with him. What did she say? That watching you today, she finally understood what I had seen in you all, those years ago, and that while she would always regret the years wasted in not seeing it themselves, she was grateful beyond words that I had. The admission, conveyed through Uncle David but clearly my mother's own words, affected me deeply. They really have changed, I said softly. People can, he replied. Not everyone, not always in all the ways we might hope. But genuine change is possible. Your parents have done that hard work, understanding their own patterns, making amends, where possible, building something new with both their daughters. As we said our goodbyes, I promised to call again the following day with more details. Returning inside, I found the group preparing to depart. Amber approached, linking her arm through mine as we walked toward the exit. Tyler and I were thinking, she said casually. What about a family weekend in San Francisco next month when Mom and Dad visit? They'll be staying with you, right? We could join for a couple of days. Make it a complete family reunion. The suggestion, so normal, so free of the undercurrents, that had characterized our family gatherings for so many years, struck me as both ordinary and extraordinary. That sounds perfect, I agreed. My place has plenty of room. Outside the restaurant, as we waited for our respective cars, Amber hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Jess, she whispered. Not just for today, but for all of it, for finding your path despite everything, for becoming this incredible person who's literally changing the world. The words, coming from the sister who had once been held up as the standard I could never reach, carried a healing power I hadn't anticipated. Thank you, I said simply, returning the embrace. Back at my hotel, I found myself too energized for sleep despite the long day. Sitting by the window overlooking the city lights, I opened my laptop and began composing an email. Dear Uncle David, today marked 15 years since that kitchen table moment when Mom and Dad told me they were giving my college fund to Amber. 15 years since what felt like the end of my dreams turned out to be just the beginning of a different path. As I stood at that podium today, announcing a system that will help ensure patients receive equitable care, regardless of their demographics, I couldn't help but think about parallels. How being undervalued and overlooked in my own family somehow prepared me to recognize and address larger systems that undervalue and overlook certain groups. How pain, channeled properly, can become purpose. You saw something in me when no one else did, not even me, really. You believed I had something valuable to contribute when my own parents had decided I was the less promising investment. Without your guidance, your faith, your practical support, I cannot imagine where I would be today. Certainly not announcing a nationwide healthcare initiative with the Secretary of HHS. The most surprising thing about today wasn't the professional success, though that was deeply satisfying. It was realizing how far we've all come as a family. Amber flying across the country to support me. Mom and Dad watching online, genuinely proud. Even the fact that I could reference that painful history in my opening remarks without it destabilizing me emotionally, that represents growth I once wouldn't have thought possible. You taught me years ago that true success isn't measured by external validation, but by meaningful impact. Today felt like the embodiment of that principle. Work that matters, that serves others, that addresses fundamental inequities. Work that would make my grandmother proud, as Mom pointed out. I've been thinking about her a lot today. This grandmother I barely knew, but whose trust fund changed the trajectory of my life when my parents diverted my college savings. Dad mentioned she was a pediatrician, one of the first women in her medical school class. I wonder what she would think of her granddaughter using advanced algorithms to address the very disparities she might have witnessed in her own practice decades ago. I like to think she would approve. Tomorrow we begin the real work of implementation, training, integration, monitoring. The announcement was just the beginning. But tonight, I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude to the person who made all of this possible through his unwavering belief in a teenager who showed up on his doorstep feeling betrayed and invisible. Thank you, Uncle David, for everything. With love and gratitude. Jessica. I sent the email, then prepared for bed, my mind finally quieting enough for sleep. As I drifted off, I thought about the long, winding path that had led to this moment. The betrayal that had sparked a journey I could never have anticipated, the mentorship that had sustained me through difficult years, the professional opportunities that had allowed me to create meaningful change, the family relationships that had slowly, imperfectly healed. My parents had given my college savings to my more gifted sister, unaware I would secure a full scholarship, access my grandmother's trust fund, and eventually build a career dedicated to ensuring equitable treatment for those historically undervalued. What had begun as a story of favoritism and betrayal had evolved into something more nuanced, a journey of self-discovery, professional purpose, and, perhaps most surprisingly, family reconciliation. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I woke early, reviewed the overnight media coverage of our announcement, largely positive, with appropriate focus on the healthcare impact rather than the technology itself, and prepared for a day of meetings with implementation teams. As I was gathering my materials, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from my father, unusual, as he typically preferred texting for brief communications. The subject line read simply, "Proud beyond words." I opened it, curious about what had prompted this formal communication. Dear Jessica, your mother. And I watched your announcement yesterday with hearts so full we could barely speak. Seeing you on that national stage, presenting work that will help so many people, was a moment of pride unlike anything we've experienced. When you began by referencing what happened 15 years ago, our decision to redirect your college fund to Amber's education, I initially felt that familiar rush of shame and regret. But as you continued, explaining how that moment had ultimately led to your current path, I understood you weren't dwelling in recrimination, but acknowledging a turning point. You've transformed what was, I now recognize, a profound parental failure into the foundation of your remarkable journey. There's something I've never told you about your grandmother, my mother. When she established those educational trusts for you and Amber, she specified they were to be equal. Both my granddaughters deserve the same opportunities, she insisted, overriding my suggestion that we might adjust the amounts based on your different interests and aptitudes. We can't possibly know at this stage where their talents truly lie, she said. Our job is to provide equal foundations and let them build their own paths. I didn't understand her wisdom then. I was so certain I could see the future clearly. Amber's athletic gifts opening doors that would benefit our whole family. Your more academic interests being secondary, practical, but not exceptional. I couldn't have been more wrong, and my mother somehow knew better than to make such judgments so early. When we diverted your college fund, when we attempted to access your trust fund without your knowledge, we weren't just being financially unfair. We were imposing limitations based on our own flawed perceptions. We were deciding your worth and potential based on criteria that now seem absurdly narrow. Watching you yesterday, commanding that room of journalists, government officials, and healthcare experts with such confidence and clarity, I was struck by the enormity of what we nearly prevented. If not for your own determination, for Uncle David's guidance, for your grandmother's foresight in establishing that trust, the world might have been deprived of the contributions you're now making. Your mother and I have spent years in therapy, trying to understand how we fell into such damaging patterns with our daughters. The favoritism, the different expectations, the unequal support. All of it justified in our minds at the time, but indefensible in retrospect. We've learned much about our own backgrounds, the patterns we unconsciously repeated, the fears and biases that clouded our judgment. None of that excuses what we did, but I hope it helps explain that our failures weren't due to loving you less or valuing you less inherently. They came from our own limitations you have long since transcended. We can never recover the years when we failed to see you clearly, to celebrate your unique gifts, to support your dreams with the same enthusiasm we showed for Amber's. That remains our greatest regret. But watching you build this remarkable life and career, seeing the woman you've become despite our failures rather than because of our support, has been the greatest privilege of our later years. I love you, Jessica. Not for your accomplishments, impressive as they are, but for your character, for your resilience in the face of our failures, for your generosity in allowing us to remain in your life when you had every right to cut us out completely. For your brilliance, yes, but more for the compassion that directs that brilliance toward helping others. Your grandmother saw what we couldn't. Uncle David saw it when we were blind. And now the world is beginning to see it too. No one could be prouder than we are to call you our daughter. With love and admiration, Dad. I read the email twice, tears gathering despite my efforts to maintain composure. My father's words, more open, more vulnerable than any conversation we'd had face to face, represented a level of self-awareness and accountability I had once doubted he could achieve. The acknowledgement of my grandmother's wisdom, the recognition of their flawed judgment, the unvarnished admission of parental failure, these were gifts perhaps more valuable than any financial support they could have provided. Not because they erased the past, but because they confirmed what I had long suspected but sometimes doubted, that the overlooking had indeed been real, not a product of my imagination or oversensitivity, and that it had been undeserved. I began composing a reply, then stopped, deciding this merited a phone call instead. But as I reached for my phone, There was a knock at my hotel room door. Dr. Washington arriving for our scheduled meeting before heading to the Department of Health and Human Services. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing my expression as I let her in. "Just an unexpectedly emotional email from my father," I explained, gesturing to my laptop. "I'll tell you about it later. We should get going." The day passed in a blur of meetings, presentations, and planning sessions. The work of implementing our algorithm across diverse healthcare systems was complex, requiring both technical precision and human sensitivity. By evening, I was mentally exhausted, but deeply satisfied with our progress. Back in my hotel room, I finally had time to call my father. It was just past 5 p.m. in Michigan, and he answered on the second ring. "Jessica," he greeted me, his voice warm. "We were just talking about you. The Washington Post ran an excellent article about your algorithm. Very clear explanation of the potential impact." "Thanks, Dad," I replied. "I actually called about your email. It meant a lot to me." There was a brief pause. "I've been trying to find the right words for years," he admitted. "Watching you yesterday somehow crystallized everything I've wanted to express but couldn't quite formulate. The part about Grandma, about how she specified the trusts should be equal. I never knew that." "We should have honored her wisdom," he said quietly. "She understood something fundamental about fairness, about not predetermining children's paths based on early observations. It took me far too long to learn that lesson." We talked for nearly an hour about my grandmother, about the implementation plans for the algorithm, about Amber and Tyler's surprise appearance at the announcement. As the conversation wound down, he said something that caught me off guard. "Your mother and I have been discussing something we'd like your input on. We're updating our will, and we'd like to establish an educational fund in your grandmother's name, a scholarship for young women pursuing careers in medicine or medical technology with a focus on addressing healthcare disparities." 20 years after that kitchen table betrayal, I stood in the university auditorium watching students file in for graduation. The Mitchell Family Scholarship for Innovation in Healthcare Equity had funded 30 promising students since its establishment. A healing full circle from the college fund that had once been taken from me. Uncle David, now in his 80s, sat in the front row beside my parents, who had aged into people I genuinely respected. Amber stood nearby, her own, children fidgeting in formal clothes. "And now," the dean announced, "our commencement address from Dr. Jessica Mitchell, whose pioneering work in ethical AI has transformed healthcare delivery nationwide." As I approached the podium, I caught my father's eye. His expression held what I'd once craved desperately, genuine pride, untainted by comparison. My mother wiped away tears, while Amber gave me a subtle thumbs up. Looking out at the graduates, I began. True success isn't measured by recognition or wealth, but by meaningful impact. Sometimes our greatest setbacks reveal our most important paths forward. My journey had come full circle. The overlooked daughter had found her voice, her purpose, her worth, not in others' validation, but in the undeniable value of her contributions to the world.